So if you spend any time at all on the internet, you are familiar with the most common response to requests for information.
Google is free.
So there are plenty of circumstances where free Google is a very useful tool in answering those questions, although a little less useful now with those AI features. But when it comes to queer identities, particularly the queer identities after the plus in the acronym of LGBTQ+, Google, free or otherwise, is not usually very helpful. Finding really reliable information about lesser known queer identities is really challenging when all you've got is the Google search engine. So I decided that I wanted to begin a series of autofill videos answering questions about these identities that I spend most of my time thinking about and inhabiting most of them, and identities that are unfamiliar to a lot of the people out there. So in this video, we are going to be focusing on autofill questions about being agender from Google. Now, all of the questions that are part of this video came from real Google autofill responses to my inputs into the search bar. So we're not faking the autofill here. These are real autofill responses. And I picked questions that I thought would be useful in a number of ways. First, I picked questions that would be useful to people who don't know anything about being agender and who are arriving at it for the first time, who might go to Google and Google questions about agender to understand what it is. I also picked questions that I thought might be useful to people identifying as agender or coming to understand themselves as agender and are navigating some of those early questions. Now, for all you I've been agender for a while and I've been around the agender block folks, these could just be useful ways to answer these questions from other people in your life. So the video is good for you too. So let's answer some autofill questions. What does agender mean? So basically, agender is a term to describe people who do not feel that they are existing in a gender. They don't have a gender identity. Gender does not really have anything to do with them. They don't consider themselves in that kind of gender spectrum. This can look like a number of different things. You can just not relate to any specific gender that is defined otherwise. You can just not really feel like gender has anything at all to do with you, period. Or you could just not understand what gender is in the first place and think it's like this completely made up fictional concept that doesn't relate to anything ever. Kind of the truth. All of those different relationships to the notion of a gender identity can fall under agender. Agender becomes this really useful umbrella term to describe people who are not otherwise described by constructions of gender, labels of gender, ideas of gender. What is the agender flag? Yeah, like we are queer people. We love flags. So agender folks do have a flag of their own, and it looks like this. The agender flag first surfaced around 2014. It was created by a Tumblr user and shared there, and it has become the flag that is commonly accepted to represent agender. The colored stripes, as in most pride flags, all have different meanings. The black and white stripes are for the absence of gender. The gray stripes represent those who are semi-genderless. And the central green stripe is for non-binary genders. What are agender pronouns? So yeah, this comes up a lot. What pronouns do agender people use, or what pronouns should agender people use? The simple answer is agender people can use whatever pronouns they want. Pronouns are things we choose for ourselves to describe how we feel in our bodies and about ourselves. So whatever pronouns an agender person wants to use is the right pronouns for that agender person. To drill down into a little bit more nuance, yeah, a lot of agender folks want to opt for they, them, like I do as an agender person. That's what I prefer in my daily life. I like they, them. Agender folks will also use neopronouns as well. But it isn't defying your agender identity to use he, him, or she, her pronouns to describe yourself. Remember, your pronouns don't define your gender identity or how you think about your own gender. They're just the words that you want people to use when they're talking to you that feel like you, whatever that you is. So if you are agender, any set of pronouns is perfectly fine. Any combination of those sets of pronouns, absolutely fine. They're all acceptable use for agender folks. Choose which works for you. Are agender people trans? Yeah, so this is a question that has a decent bit of nuance to it. I actually made a video all on its own about this particular question. It's this video right here, and I will put a link to it in the description of this video for you to check out if you want. But the basic answer is yes, agender people are considered trans. Transgender as an experience encompasses everyone who is living a gender identity that is different from the one they were assigned at birth, no matter what that movement away from that initial assignment looks like. For a lot of trans people, that's moving to another binary gender. That could just be moving to a non-binary gender identity and understanding yourself that way. And it can also look like moving away from gender identification completely and settling with some form of agender. All of those are trans experiences, so you can consider agender trans. Now, this doesn't mean that every agender person will call themselves trans. Like, the complications about how people use language to talk about themselves sort of transcends basic definitions. I explore that more in the video, so it's worth checking out if you're further curious. Are agender and genderless the same? Yeah, so that's a tricky question, and another thing that has a lot of nuance to it. At its most basic level, when you're talking about being agender, you are talking about not having a gender or not relating to a gender. That is, you could say, genderless. But the exact dimensions of that non-relationship to gender or with gender can have a lot of different textures and layers for the individual who is experiencing it. So not every agender person will consider themselves genderless. They may consider agender, for example, to be one part of the overall gender spectrum that just talks about not identifying with the socially constructed genders that we have available to us. Other folks will consider agender as like something that is absolutely genderless. Gender has nothing to do with me. And that is equally agender as the other idea. So I think it's okay to think about agender and genderless as being the same or very closely connected, because in a broad sense they are, but it is always good when you're encountering an agender person, or any queer person for that matter, to be gently and warmly curious and ask questions about what that identity means to them. How do you experience that? Because then you really get the nuances and you can understand why that word is the word they chose for themselves. Is agender a spectrum? Oh yeah, of course. It's queer. Of course it's a spectrum. Everything queer is a spectrum. Queer people love their spectrums, and agender is one of them. As with any other queer identity, and with human experience almost universally, there is a spectrum of experience inside that umbrella term agender. We've talked about that variety a little bit already in the video, but it's just good to remember that when you say agender, you are not talking about a monolithic experience. You are talking about a thing that encompasses a lot of different kinds of experiences that are interrelated. They are connected. And usually in queer terms, the umbrella terms for a set of experiences like agender or asexual or aromantic are describing experiences that share similar social locations. What that means is that these sets of experiences that fall under that big umbrella term exist in a similar place in relation to the dominant culture. So they may experience similar forms of discrimination. They may share similar experiences of moving through the world and knocking up against cultural norms and cultural messages. They are situated in the hierarchy of society in a similar place. So if you want to think geographically, you can think about umbrella terms like agender and asexual, aromantic, and beyond to be describing like neighborhoods that people can live in. So everybody has their own individual house, right, in the neighborhood, but it's still a neighborhood. You're all sharing a similar geographic place. You can turn that into like how you think about umbrella terms and all the spectrums of identity identity underneath them. The spectrum is all the individual houses on the streets and blocks of a neighborhood. And for agender, that neighborhood contains all of the individual ways one relates or ultimately not relates to gender identity and gender as an experience. Quick thank you to my Patreon subscribers who make videos like this possible. If you want to join the fun there, you can get bonus videos, early access to videos here, and discounts on workshops. Or if you just want to support me here, my YouTube channel memberships offer members-only shorts, early access to future videos, loyalty badges, and custom emojis for comments. Links are in the description for Patreon, or hit the join button. Is agender LGBTQ? Yes, absolutely. Agender experience is an LGBTQ experience. It is a queer experience. Often people in the A's of the acronym, asexual, aromantic, and agender, are often accused of not being queer because how can it be queer to not experience something? And I can make an entire video on the experience of not experiencing stuff that I probably should. But the reality is not experiencing something, not experiencing sexual attraction, not experiencing romantic attraction, not experiencing gender. Sure, you're not experiencing those things, but the repercussions of that not experiencing, the social consequences of that not experiencing is a real thing one experiences. So there is presence to what is not present. And when it comes to agender people, the social repercussions and the social experience of being agender in a very gender binary dominated world is discriminated against. It is marginalized. So it is queer. Is agender non-binary? Well, it depends on who you ask. At its most basic level, we have the two binary genders, man, woman, and everything else that exists on the gender spectrum falls under non-binary, right? If you are not inhabiting one of those binary genders, then you fall into non-binary. Again, it's like that umbrella term that is the neighborhood that all the individual experiences are living in. So some agender people do also consider themselves non-binary and use that language to talk about themselves. That is language that I, as an agender person, am comfortable with. I use non-binary to also describe my experience. It makes sense to me as an agender person to consider my not connecting and or inhabiting gender in my body in any kind of way that feels real to me, to think about that as non-binary. But there are plenty agender people who disagree with that. For them, agender is an experience that has nothing to do with gender at all, binary or non-binary. So to call themselves as an agender person non-binary places them inside a binary construct that they feel like they have nothing to do with. So for agender people who understand their experience that way, non-binary does not describe them. It is not a word that they would use to describe themselves. They're choosing agender to define where they exist in relation to not just binary gender, but gender overall. So this is another example of one of those places where it's good to ask. Don't assume that someone who is agender considers themselves non-binary. For that matter, don't assume that someone who is agender considers themselves trans either. But you can, with gentle, warm curiosity, ask. So how do you relate to that? How does that relate to things like non-binary? Dig down deeper and let an agender person explain their experience so you can get a better hold over it. But, if someone is agender and does describe themselves as non-binary, that is also a completely authentic and valid, real way to experience agender identity too. So that's all the autofill questions for this video. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more agender autofill answers, or if you'd like to see autofill answers from other identities like asexual, aromantic. If you'd like to see more of this, let me know what you want to see. Happy to make videos that meet your needs. YouTube isn't the only place you can find me. If you're just discovering me here, you can also find me on Instagram and TikTok and in other places too. Please go and find me in those places. And I'll see you in the next video. And as always, I'm glad you're here.